Travel is a passion for many of us and has been for some time. So there is another simple principle in designing structures that we must consider. Now, often geography and climate determine important things about design. In other words, where we are affects the way we design the things that we build. And one of the best examples of this are the railways. They exist all over the world, and up to a point, they all look alike. All railways have tracks that are kept a fixed distance apart by ties, and they all have engines pulling coaches and freight cars and so on. But there are some significant differences. Here we have an engine which has a boiler and is driven by steam. This one too is a steam locomotive of a slightly earlier vintage. But there are big differences between the two. That one has a flared smokestack, whereas this one has a tall stack with a strange-looking object on top. It's called a spark catcher. But why has this one got one, whereas the other one hasn't? Well, the engine without a spark catcher is based on a design from England, where the most plentiful supply of fuel was coal. And coal burns without making a lot of sparks. And besides, the English countryside is damp, and the trains rarely pass through vast uninhabited forests or dry plains that might catch fire. Well, of course, the engine with the spark catcher was designed for use in North America. There was no convenient source of coal in the middle of nowhere, but there was almost always an abundant supply of timber. So most North American engines built in the last century burned wood. They made lots of sparks. You know that if you have a fireplace at home. And for the same reason that you put a screen in front of your wood-burning fireplace, the designers of early North American steam engines had to put a screen over the smokestack. This provided some degree of protection to the vast plains and forests the trains had to pass through, to say nothing of keeping the wooden bridges and trestles from catching fire, which would not have been any good at all. Oh, and speaking of catchers, another difference in the two engines is on the front. The North American train has a cow catcher bolted to its front. The English one doesn't. Now, it's not that the English didn't have cattle. They certainly did. But they also had hedges and stone fences to keep the beasts off the tracks. On the North American continent, it was much easier to put a fence on the front of the engine and sacrifice an occasional startled steer than it was to build